Cantrell says she has no intention of firing her communications director, Gregory Joseph, and she accuses the city council of fostering a hostile work environment. As Sabrina Wilson reports, Council President J.P. Moreno reacted quickly.
See how hard this is? I've had it up to here, and I've taken it personally. But when you really begin to attack the men and women that not only I depend on, but again, that we all depend on, and who make the sacrifices and to show up, and this is how we treat our people. This is not New Orleans.
Mayor Cantrell isn't happy that her communications director, Gregory Joseph, faces charges leveled by the New Orleans City Council. The council voted to charge Joseph with incompetence, neglect of duty, and gross misconduct. It involves the use of thousands in city funds for a mailer that went out to the public highlighting the administration's accomplishments during the recall drive against Cantrell.
Currently, Gregory Joseph being labeled incompetent, unbelievable, and a liar.
She says the council has created a hostile and unhealthy environment for city workers.
What is clear is that this council continues to pour hundreds of thousands of dollars of taxpayers' money into investigations that continue to yield little to no results at all. And results for the people of this city and the people that we were elected to serve. Again, going back to this hostile environment. This is a part of it.
On October 3rd, the council holds a hearing during which it could decide to dismiss Joseph from city employment. Cantrell thinks the proceedings involving Joseph are unconstitutional.
The whole process, period. Soup to nuts, the whole process. Relative to my employee, yes, never happened before.
Council President J.P. Moreno responded during his own press conference.
I'll begin by saying, wow, that was interesting. One of the biggest, most glaring things I feel like I should address off the bat is the investigation regarding the $50,000 of misspent public dollars for that mailer. The council spent $0 on that investigation. That was actually done by staff in-house.
Moreno added that the council may have spent a couple $100 on a transcript. He says they tried to work with the administration.
If the mayor believes that us holding departments accountable to do their jobs is creating a toxic work environment, then I would argue that what is the alternative? Do we just let government exist in dysfunction to spare people's feelings? Or do we hold people to a bare level of accountability? And that's what the council sought to do.
And on the unconstitutional claim, Moreno says
nothing that we have done is outside what the charter allows. And as far as our constitutional argument, you can't really respond to an argument that is nonsense.
And the mayor made it clear that, as far as she's concerned, Gregory Joseph will remain a city employee.
We're not losing Gregory Joseph.
If mayor would choose to not remove Mr. Joseph after the council under the charter voted to do so, that there would likely be litigation that would arise from that and she would lose.
Council Vice President Helena Moreno reacted to the mayor, saying she gave the council what it asked for by doing a national police chief search. In a statement, Moreno said, "I'll only respond to the issue of confirmation of the chief of police. Voters in New Orleans overwhelmingly gave confirmation power to the council, and that has nothing to do with who the mayor selects to nominate for police chief. That decision falls squarely on the mayor." And she said, "I was actually surprised and disappointed that Michelle Woodfork was not the nominee to come before us for confirmation. She has worked tremendously well with my office, even formed a working group with my team and made a positive strides in reducing crime. I think she's done a good job with what she's inherited." Moreno also says she looks forward to learning more about Kirkpatrick and her plans to make New Orleans a safer city. Lee.